I was a night shift CNA at a newly developed nursing home. I had worked at other nursing homes before and expected a few paranormal experiences, but with this being a new building, I thought it would be all good. However, this building had been built on top of the soil from an old nursing home that had been around for decades and demolished to make way for this new facility. Everything was fine at first. For a few months, we had a few residents, but as the numbers increased and different halls started to fill, things started to get spooky at night. I've always been somewhat of a magnet to spiritual things, and my shift partner was a paranormal investigator in her spare time, so needless to say, I should have expected this. Anyway, we had the usual things like hearing doors slam in vacant rooms, or chairs moving at the nurse's station in the middle of the night. I could handle that stuff, but our experiences started getting too close for my taste. One night, I was at the nurse's desk alone, around 3 a.m., when a female voice screamed, "Help me!" right behind my right ear. I jumped and turned, expecting to see a resident behind me, but there was no one there. An hour later, a resident down the hall paged me and said there was a woman screaming for help in her room. She wanted to make sure I found her. I didn't see anyone else. Resident pagers would also go off and we would check the room, only to find those residents sound asleep. One time a poor guy started freaking out and said, "Get me the hell out of this room. Someone was shaking my bed." All of these things happened at night, and the day shift CNAs never experienced anything, so they never believed us. This happened more than a year ago, during the time my girlfriend and I, both 22 at the time, were illegally renting an apartment in Amsterdam for 5 months. This incident took place in January, during the last month of our stay. It's genuinely one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. It was around 1 a.m. My girlfriend and I were both in bed. She was fast asleep already, but I was still scrolling through Instagram. Suddenly, our doorbell rang. Now, to give you an idea of where we were located in our apartment complex, we were on the second floor of the building, and there were 2 apartments on each floor. When you walked up the stairs, there was one apartment on the left and one on the right. Across from us was a neighbor that we hadn't really seen much during our stay. When we did see him, he always came off as a bit weird. Some evenings he would be very drunk. My girlfriend and I are a lesbian couple, and when he found out about this when we moved in, he asked some weird and offensive questions. Our downstairs neighbors had seemed okay, but we hadn't talked much to them either. One floor above us were the storage rooms, one for every person living in our apartment complex. Some weren't in use though, and the doors were even unlocked, which had always seemed weird to me and my girlfriend. There was a doorbell system downstairs at the main entrance, and everyone had their own personal doorbell. The one that rang during this night was the one downstairs. My girlfriend jolted awake. The harsh buzzing sound boomed through our apartment. I was immediately on edge. She was mostly annoyed and wanted to go right back to sleep. The person kept ringing the doorbell. I got more and more unnerved, wondering who in their right mind would keep someone awake like this. In order to answer the downstairs doorbell system, there was a phone in our apartment, across from the front door. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone to find out what was going on, but my girlfriend convinced me to wait. We then faintly heard the doorbell ring in our downstairs neighbor's apartment as well, before ours went off again. The walls in our building were very thin, and the apartments were in bad shape overall, so we could hear the doorbell quite well. Suddenly I got scared that something was wrong in our building. Maybe there was a fire. Did we really want to be the ones burning alive because we were too stubborn to pick up the phone? I asked my girlfriend if I could just find out who was at the door. She agreed. I got out of bed in nothing but my underwear, something I would later come to regret, and walked to the phone. I picked it up. Hello? There was a man downstairs. He told me in a weird mixture of Dutch and English that he was worried about a friend of his that lived in our building. He said his friend had been very drunk earlier in the evening and that he wasn't answering his phone anymore. So the man wanted to come inside to check on his friend. Now, before you judge my next actions, here are some arguments to defend myself. 1. I immediately thought of our weird neighbor across the hall. It didn't seem too far-fetched that he was the drunk friend that this man was worried about. 2. Despite the motto, be weird, be rude, stay alive, I still suddenly felt very awkward in denying this man entrance while he expressed concern for his friend. So even though I didn't know or couldn't see the man downstairs, and despite his story being kind of weird and his speech hard to understand at times, I pressed the button that unlocked the front door downstairs. The moment I did this, my gut feeling that something seemed off got confirmed. The man started laughing really loud and yelled "Chow" into the speaker. The sound of his manic laughter was so loud that even my girlfriend, who was sitting upright in the bed, could hear it. Immediately, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. We looked at each other, terrified. I knew this was all wrong. While I heard his footsteps running up the stairs, I checked to see if our front door was locked. It wasn't. While cursing myself, I retrieved the keys from my coat pocket and turned them in the lock. Because of my panic to lock the door as fast as possible, my hands were shaking like crazy. I was praying to myself, please not our front door, please. But as soon as I locked the door, the man was at the top of the second stairs. He ran up to our front door and pounded on it. I stumbled back into our living room.
Open the door, you whore.
The door rattled in its hinges. I almost shat myself. I wanted to get back to my girlfriend, but in order to do that, I would have to walk past the front door. I wish I was dressed in more than just my underwear. I felt so vulnerable in that moment. I took a deep breath and just made a run for it. I ran past the front door, past the peephole, but I was too scared to get that close to the maniac on the other side of the only thing that kept me safe. My girlfriend was hiding under our sheets, frozen in fear. I crawled into bed with her and whispered, "We have to call the police. We have to." She was shaking her head. "No, we can't make a sound. He has to think we aren't home." Meanwhile, we could hear the guy taking a few steps back, running up to our door and throwing himself at it. Sometimes he would be silent for a few seconds before the pounding started again. He kept demanding that the door be opened. I expected the door to break open any second. I honestly thought he was going to kill us. My girlfriend and I just held on to each other and were just frozen in fear. We had no weapons and didn't want to make any noise, fearing he would hear us through the thin walls. Suddenly, it got very quiet. With trembling hands, I picked the phone up from our nightstand and called the police. It was around 1:45 a.m. They luckily took us very seriously and immediately sent a patrol car over. They said that the police who were coming would call us. They hung up, and we waited. Minutes went by. Not wanting to be alone, we decided to call my dad. Luckily for us, he was still awake. He was very spooked by our story. All of a sudden, while talking to him, we heard footsteps in the main hall. Not loud ones, very quiet ones, like someone was sneaking around. "Oh my God, Dad, I think he's still here," I cried. My dad called the police from his place, and they informed him that it was them making their rounds through the apartment complex. Kind of annoyed they had accidentally spooked us like that, I thanked my dad for checking. The policemen left without really speaking to us, but they did tell my dad on the phone that everything had been checked. They didn't find anyone. Kind of relieved, we hung up. My dad had drank one beer too many to be able to pick us up. I could tell he felt bad about that. After that, my girlfriend and I tried to relax, but we knew we wouldn't be able to sleep. We kept thinking he would come back. Every noise startled us. I also started wondering if maybe he was hiding in one of those storages upstairs. After an hour, we gave up and called my girlfriend's mom in hopes she'd be awake. She was, and she drove half an hour to come pick us up. We made sure there was someone staying over at our place during the next few nights after that, which helped us feel more safe. Needless to say, we were very happy to almost be moving out of the apartment. Luckily, the strange man never came back. We never found out what his reason for entering was either. Was he on drugs? Drunk? Was he having psychosis? I couldn't help but wonder, what if I had looked through the peephole at whoever was on the other side of the door? Would I have recognized him? Or would I recognize him later in someone who passed me on the street? I guess I'll never know. To this day, it was still the scariest thing to ever happen to me or my girlfriend. This happened to me when I was in my early mid-teens. My family went out for a day hike and I hadn't felt like going, so I just chilled at home. Things were fine for most of the morning, and from memory I think I just pottered around the house, cleaning up a bit, watching some TV. It was around mid-afternoon when I decided to read a book. I settled down on the dining room floor by the glass sliding door that leads up to the balcony to soak up the sun while I read. It was enjoyable. Nothing seemed out of place at all. I lose track of time when I read, so I can't be sure how long I'd been sitting there, when all of a sudden my skin began prickling like crazy. I'd never felt anything so intense. Pins and needles just running all over my skin, and the hairs on my arms were raised. I realized two things. Something was wrong, and I wasn't alone. Without thinking, I looked up, and for a few seconds that seemed to last a lifetime, I saw the blackest shadow in broad daylight. I almost stopped breathing. It was standing in the doorway that led from the kitchen dining area out to the lounge room. I clearly remember that it looked male. It was tall, had wildly spiked hair, and lean-looking. I couldn't see the thing's face at all, but it was definitely watching me. Then it stepped back and disappeared. My heart hammering, I slowly put the book down and got up and walked over to where I'd seen this shadow man. There was no indication it had been there, except for a slightly cold spot in the doorway. Shaky, I went back to where I'd been sitting in the sun reading my book, and I stayed there until my family came home. I didn't tell any of them what had happened, and it wasn't until quite a few years later that I told my little sister what I had seen in our parents' house. Then she related a story that was similar to mine. A shadow had formed on the wall, around the same area that I had seen it, just past the doorway to the lounge room. She said it had stayed for a few moments before completely disappearing, and she'd also been alone at the time. I never asked my older brother if he'd experienced anything, but the two younger siblings and I were sure there was something in that house. All three of us, at some time or another, had woken to the sound of someone walking around in the dead of night, when no one would have been up. The sound would start out of nowhere, these slow, dragging steps that would go from the kitchen to the lounge room and then stop. I never saw that shadow man again while I lived there, but I'll never forget it. This happened about 2 years ago. I haven't told anybody. I had a friend who managed a large office supply store. About once a month, they would remove old inventory. He would tell me when, and I'd take my truck late at night and grab office chairs, supplies, phones, etc. from the dumpsters. One night, I was out there grabbing what I could. It was about 2 a.m. The dumpsters were behind the store, and there was a chain-link fence next to it, and an alley on the other side of the fence. I heard a noise from the fence, so I looked over, and there was a little black boy leaning on the fence in his PJs. I was startled and confused why the boy was out so late. He only looked to be 5 or 6 years old. I asked him if he was okay, and playfully said he really scared me. The boy then said,
"Don't be scared. Everything is fine."
but the voice that came from this small child was deeper than most adult men. It literally paralyzed me for a few seconds, until I was able to scramble to my truck and take off. And it wasn't a little person. I know what I saw. I went to summer camp in a rural part of New Jersey back in the mid-1990s. The camp was situated on a long, narrow, man-made lake. One end of the lake was reserved for swimming, which we do as a group activity every other day or so. The swimming area had one long dock stretching straight out onto the water, and 2 square floating docks further out. One of the 2 floating docks was a bit far away, and although I had spent a few summers at this camp at the time of this incident, I had never seen anyone use the second dock. So one day our group of about a dozen 11-year-olds got the bright idea that we were going to swim out to the faraway dock. I would consider this to be a moderate challenge for a casual swimmer. When we reached the dock, I noticed a strange-looking spider on the ladder that you had to use to climb up. It was quite large in terms of overall footprint, probably about 2 inches from end to end, with long, skinny legs. Spiders, of course, are normal critters to encounter in nature, but this one stood out to me because of its unusual appearance. After the long swim, we took a few minutes to lie on the dock and rest in the sun. It was relaxing, and we were all having a good time. We started messing around and decided to play one of our regular games, where we would all shuffle toward the corner of the dock, causing it to sink. As the corner of the dock started to sink and fill with water, hundreds of giant spiders came frantically pouring out from between the boards, swarming over and around our feet. This dock was theirs, apparently. We all immediately began to scream and jump into the water, trying to get away. But the spiders were in the water too, and stuck to us as we swam. I vividly remember the feeling of them clinging to my wet hair, fleshy bodies and long squirming legs hopelessly intertwined with my own strands. Adrenaline propelled us back to the main part of the swimming area, and by the time we got there, thankfully we were spider-free. But this is a childhood trauma that lingers with me. I had not really been afraid of spiders before, but I would say this was a major turning point. The thought of us lying on the dock in the sun, completely oblivious to the horde that was lurking just inches beneath us, creeps me out to this day. Way back in 8th grade, I had a friend, John. Years before, his house had burned down and was deemed unlivable. Now, being a kid full of confidence and not fully believing yet, me and another friend Jim called BS when he said his burned down house was haunted. Well, one day John agrees to take us there. His family still had the keys. Walking up to the place, John had told us about several experiences in the house, from a large Civil War-looking soldier to energy orbs and children's laughter that would appear and disappear. We still called BS and went inside. Most of the inside of the house was fine. The real damage had been done in the garage and that side of the house. When we were inside, the house felt strange. Zero airflow, but no dust, and at first dead silence. We went to his old room, and we all very faintly heard music. The strangest part is each of us heard entirely different genres: rock, classical, and rap. We went to his sister's old room, but nothing else weird happened, so we moved on to John's parents' room. That was our next and final stop of the tour. When we tried the door, it felt sealed, like something heavy was against it, or a vacuum was applying pressure. With a good shove, we managed to open it, and got the biggest gust of stale, dead, musty air I've ever had. It smelled horrible, and we took off. Halfway across the street, Jim called out, "Hey guys, look!" We turned and saw a huge apparition in the window, easily 6 foot plus and a solid fridge build. He was solid looking, but you had to stare and squint hard to start to get the edges of details. And he was watching us, staring us down from inside. Obviously freaked, we ran all the way to John's current house. And that's the story of my first paranormal experience, way back in 8th grade. I'm completely skeptical, but what happened in the summer of 2014 still creeps me out. I had a dream one night. I knew the man from my mother's church. He wasn't a close friend of my family or anything. I probably said hi to him twice, maximum. I don't even remember his name, but I dreamed of him. I don't remember his face anymore, but I knew it was him. He was at the beach and I tried to reach him. When he saw me, he just said bye, with a smile on his face, and walked toward the sea. Then he swam out of my sight. When I woke, I had a strange feeling. It was a strange dream after all. 2 days after that, his wife asked the whole church to pray for him because he went missing. After a week, his body was found on the coast. He drowned. To this day, his family doesn't know how he ended up in the sea. There are a lot of stories about these kind of dreams in my family. I don't believe in mediums or psychics or anything, but I still think about that a lot. When I was a baby, my parents bought a piggy bank from a flea market. It wasn't anything special, except that it had these intense turquoise glass eyes. They set it on a shelf and didn't think too much about it, but I started talking to it. As I said, I was a baby, so it was unintelligible babbling, but I would sit for hours just babbling and laughing at this pig. Eventually, my mom got creeped out by it, so she moved the pig to a higher shelf, thinking that if it was more out of the way, I wouldn't be so interested. I crawled around the house and found it. My mom found me sitting on the floor talking and laughing up at this pig. Again, she was creeped out, so that night, while I slept, she put the pig on the top shelf of her closet, all the way at the back, behind some random boxes. It wasn't visible to her, and certainly wasn't visible to me from the floor. The next morning, as she's making breakfast, she hears me babbling and laughing in the other room. She goes to investigate and finds me in her bedroom. I had opened the closet door and was sitting on the floor, staring at the underside of the shelf in the exact spot where the pig was hidden. That night, she put the pig in the trash. The next morning, she woke to find me sitting talking to the pig that was now on the kitchen table. She lost her mind and called my dad. They had a family member watch me while they took hammers to that pig. They smashed it into dust, vacuumed it up, and my dad drove all of the bagged debris to the dump. The only parts they couldn't smash were the eyes, no matter how hard they hit them with the hammers. My mom said that the next morning when my dad, a very rational and non-superstitious military officer, went to leave for work, he took a moment before opening the door to carefully peek outside, certain that he was going to see that pig intact, sitting on the doorstep. Hey guys and ladies, thanks for watching. Are you surprised to see me? I missed you. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. We'll do a skit and then we'll wrap this up. And I want to thank Dodge This 82 for helping me in a story, and Lizardo for helping me in the skit. And that's about it. So be good to animals, even people. See ya. Residents of Elderberry Gardens, Monday meeting in 5 minutes. Meet me in the Sunshine Room. That's the Monday meeting in 5 minutes in the Sunshine Room. Ah, the joys of working at a nursing home. Hey guys, how are you? Hey Margaret.
Huh?
Big bad Leroy Brown, what's up, man?
Huh?
Okay guys, come over here. This way. Hello, people.
What? NANI?
Yo, over here.
What?
Come over here.
What?
Steve, come over here.
What?
We're gonna do the announcements like we do every Monday. That's why I called the meeting. Okay, that's the bottom line. Okay, first off, are there any complaints I need to know about?
I can't see, goddammit.
I don't have any teeth.
My cock doesn't work. Okay, not complaints about being old. I'm talking about complaints within Elderberry Gardens.
I don't want to wear a diaper.
Okay, I'm sure you don't want to wear a diaper, but clearly you need to wear one. Look at your sweats. They're soaked. And could you take a step back? I don't want your piss on me. This Thursday is movie night. Okay, guys, hello.
What?
Are you listening to me? We're watching a movie on Thursday, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Have you guys seen that? Jack Nicholson.
What?
Okay, we're watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest on Thursday.
What?
NANI?
What?
What the fuck?
Forget it. You're not going to remember what I said in 5 minutes anyway.
Scout, Snema, Barksmas, Herish.